Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to start letting some of you in, and then we'll look to make a start as swiftly as possible with today's Lunch and Learn webinar and our guest speaker. But just want to make sure that we've got plenty of time to let people come in from the waiting room. Excellent. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to today's Finance Beyond Borders Lunch and Learn webinar. My name's Mark Swing. I'm the Senior Client Success Manager here at Enterprise Nation, and I'm very happy to welcome you to today's webinar. For those of you joining an Enterprise Nation Lunch and Learn for the first time, we are a vibrant community of small businesses and business advisors that exist to shortcut your route to trusted business support. Today's session is part of our Finance Beyond Borders programme, and we've partnered with the global payments and financial platform for growing businesses, Airwallex, to bring you a free learning series to ambitious founders who are looking to cut international costs, simplify money management, and to empower businesses to operate globally with ease. And for more information about the programme, you can visit the Finance Beyond Borders Hub, and I'll share a link to that directly in the chat. But today, I'm really pleased to introduce to you our guest speaker, Mike Wilson, who is the CEO at the specialist export consultancy Go Exporting, who successfully helped companies to expand into new international markets. And today, Mike will be helping to break down the practical steps to understanding what's involved in expanding internationally, how to explore new markets with confidence, and how to do it efficiently without the stress and complexity that often comes with it. If you've got any questions throughout the course of the session, do please post them in the Q&A function in the chat, and we will do our very best to answer them at the end of the webinar. It would also be great if everyone could share in the chat where they're tuning in from today, and a little introduction to your business as well. So, and finally, today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll send a follow-up email to you later today with the recording and any further resources that might be relevant. But without further ado, over to you, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. As Mark said, we're going to sort of talk about how to go global without the headaches, or without too many headaches, hopefully. And so we're going to break it down into different steps. We're not going to have the chance to go through all of these different steps today, but we're going to go through some of the most important ones, sort of up to selecting your route to market and completing your export plan. So we may miss out some of the ones in between there. So we break it down in our programs with clients to 8 essential steps for planning an international journey, and each step is equally important. So you have to go through a process to make sure that we get it right, and we don't fall into any traps, and we make it as headacheless as possible. The first thing is, why do we want to export? Because it seems obvious. We want to increase sales. We want to maybe increase our economies of scale. So if we've got a production, we can increase our production levels, reduce our overall costs. Reducing local market dependency is a big one. So we've grown to the maximum level in our home market, and now we want to go overseas to expand further. Maybe home market has started to slow down its growth. Increase our competitiveness by understanding what's out there, what our competitors are doing, and what we need to do to be competitive in new markets. Innovation is one that people don't often think about, but exporting does breed innovation, because we have to look at the markets and what we might need to do, again, to fit in with that new market, or to be able to capture that new market. It might be slightly different to what we're doing in our home market, so it can breed innovation. And of course, in the end of the day, what we're all looking for is to increase our profits. But before you commit to an export strategy, it's really important to consider, the following questions, really, to make sure that you're ready to export, and that you're doing it for the right reasons. So have you maximized your business at home? If you're still growing your business in your home market, whether that's the UK or elsewhere, then maybe you need to still focus on that to put your effort into the market, to get to a level where you're satisfied and you can see that growth is beginning to slow down a bit. Could international expansion affect your current business? Well, if it could, then that's something to carefully consider. Excuse me. Would production be stretched? Would your resources, would your finances be stretched? You need to take these things into consideration. clearly one of the key things is to understand what your objectives are. What are you trying to achieve? If you just think it'd be nice to travel to a few different countries, then that's not the right reason to be exporting, because it is difficult. It can be challenging, but at the same time, it can be very rewarding. But you have to do it as a core strategy for the business. So understand what you want to achieve over what period of time, and do you have the resources to do that? What resources do you have? You have to match your ambition to your resources, so that export, international expansion is a core part of your strategy. And of course, we need to be clear about what is your attitude to risk. Whenever you go into a new market, there's going to be some element of risk that you need to be aware of. We can minimize it, but you need to understand what your level of comfort is with regards to risk. The first thing we need to look at, though, is, are we ready for export? Is your organization ready to export from the top to the bottom, from the CEO, the MD, through to the person who's going to fill the boxes? Where are you now along that journey? Are you ready? Are you where you need to be? And if you're not, what steps do you need to take to get there? We do a gap analysis for businesses in our assessments, which includes the people, products, services, finance, production, systems, policies, and more. All the things that we're going to need. You'd be surprised that it does affect all areas of the business, and the business does need to be ready in all areas in order to make the most of the export opportunity. So it's a great way also of really understanding your business, looking at it from a different viewpoint to see if you're ready for that and what situation you're actually in. So you evaluate the resources required for export, and through that, develop an export readiness action plan. So just give you some idea of the kind of gap analysis that you would look at. So for example, products. Are your products ready? Situation now may be that the UK is focused and the features are suitable for the UK market, if the UK is your home market, but that might not be quite right for an international market. The market may require, you might have a blue switch, so they may require a red switch, simple things like that. So we need to make sure that our products and the features that we're offering are adapted for the market. And what we do is we set a priority level. How important is that at this moment in time to get it right? Certification. Do you need CE marking? Do you need UKCA, UL listing for the US, for example? What certifications are required for your product to get into the market? Again, if the certification is required, then that's going to be the highest priority, because without it, you can't do anything. Your website, maybe it's your home market focused, UK focused, with its content and search engine optimization, but you need to internationalize it for your target markets. And that might be quite different in reality to what you're doing in the home market, for example. So the search phrases will clearly be in a different language in your target market. If you're going to France or somewhere, not for the US, but the way people search, or the terms that they use to search for your product or service, may be different. So you can't just do a direct translation. So really looking at the internationalization. And one of the key things, obviously, when you're dealing internationally is how you're going to accept money, how you're going to accept customers paying you, and how you're going to pay any suppliers if they're overseas. So how you're going to handle currency. And that's the speciality of our sponsors, Airwallex, and they have a great system for being able to set up multiple bank accounts in multiple currencies, euro and US dollars, but also any currency that you need around the world, Australian dollars and so on. And their system is one of the easiest I've seen to actually be able to make payments and be able to set up those different accounts. So you can accept payments in euros or US dollars. Not everyone wants to pay in pounds, for example, if you're a UK company. So it's important that you have that facility to be able to accept different currencies, but then that you get the most from that currency in terms of its exchange rate. So when you exchange it back into pounds, if you do that, then you need to get the best exchange rate. And believe me, you're not going to get the best exchange rate through your normal bank. I've had a client only recently that had an order for $150,000. He just took the payments in dollars and sent it straight to his GBP bank account through his normal high street bank. And when we showed him how much he could have made extra, it was more around the sort of £5,000 mark that he could have recouped more if he'd used a system like Airwallex that gives you an interbank rate or close to interbank rates rather than just the standard rate. So through that, we then develop an export readiness action plan. So we've gone through, we've seen where the gap analysis is, and we picked out the areas that we need to focus on. So for example, with our website, we've already mentioned it's important to internationalize it, to review the content, language options, your search engine optimization plan, and your pay-per-click, your advertising budget through there. And just the same as we've already mentioned on currency, it's important you do set up those currency accounts, review the exchange impact that that's going to have could have on your business. If the currency suddenly moved by 10%, that's going to affect your margins one way or the other. So consider ways of mitigating that risk through. It can be through futures purchases using your money to keeping it in dollars, for example, and using that for purchases, and so on. There are different ways, different facilities that you can use to be able to mitigate those kind of risks. So we've now looked at how we prepare for export. Are we ready for export? Let's just assume now we've decided we are ready, and we want to know, okay, there's a lot of countries out there, where do we start? And we don't want to spend a fortune on research. How do we go about it? Of course, a lot of people now will use ChatGPT or something similar as a starting point to look at research. That's a good starting point, but be aware that it does sometimes make mistakes, and you need to really verify what it's saying, and take a more considered approach maybe. So for example, narrow it down in your own mind. So there are, depending on how you measure it, there are between 195 and 215 countries in the world. You can't be everywhere at once. So we need to narrow down the options. We need to use logic and our knowledge. We know that the US is going to be a bigger market than Luxembourg, for example, but that doesn't necessarily mean the US is the best market for us to go to. So we need to look, for example, at free trade agreements. Where can we trade without any tariffs? Where some of the complexities, some of the paperwork has been removed by the trade agreements. The UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement is one of the deepest free trade agreements, even though it's not as good as when we were within the EU. It's still better than a lot of trade agreements. So look at those kind of things. That helps you narrow down which countries or which regions to look at. But of course, that only goes so far. We still have to look at how we're going to narrow that down further. So one of the key areas that's often overlooked actually is research your own data. Where do your website visitors and social media followings come from? Where do your inquiries come from? Where do you currently sell? What are the drivers for those sales that you're getting? And are they one-off or are they regular orders? If you're getting regular orders from one country, then that's obviously a sure sign that there's opportunities there. But why are there opportunities there? One client I worked with was suddenly getting a lot of opportunities in Qatar, and they didn't understand why. They were active in that region, but they didn't understand why until they found out that the surrounding nations had blocked their borders to trade with Qatar effectively, and Qatar needed to find alternative sources outside of the Middle East region. So that led to increased demand, which they've managed to capitalize on. But it's important to be aware and to understand and to see what the opportunities are. Other incident recent changes, so just talked about. So look at where there is a real market demand and understand why your product or service is in demand. One, again, often underutilized tool is to see what your competitors are doing. Where are they where are they present? Where have they got a company? Where have they got distributors? Where do they exhibit? Where do they have subsidiaries, for example? Where do they have specific websites or social media accounts? Which languages do they translate their brochures into, for example? All of these things will give you an indication of which countries they may be targeting, and you really narrow down your options from there. Sometimes it's also important to look at, if the competition have got any particular approvals in a particular country or region. Also, if they're members of any trade associations or trade bodies. Again, good indicators that there's a market, that they see a market in a particular area. And don't be scared of competition. The fact that they're there does mean that there is a good potential there. Later on, you need to analyze what is that accessible market for you, but is there still enough left? But this is a good indication initially that that country offers a good opportunity or has demand for your product or service. Getting information about actual market size and growth is important, to get real market data. Sometimes that can be very expensive, but sometimes you can gain a lot just from the summaries of paid research that you can find on the internet. Or some trade bodies have a lot of information about about their market in their country, which they often have publications or newsletters that you can find on their websites that will give you good information. Government departments often produce information or will provide information. Chambers of commerce also. Look at databases. CIA Factbook is another area that you can look at. It is produced by the CIA, and it has a lot of facts about a lot of countries and about their key markets and their key market sectors, which can be very useful in giving you a broader outline of which countries to go to. You can commission research, of course, but do that as a specific research with specific objectives if that's what you're going to do. So analyze the size of the market and the growth rate. So it's no point being the biggest market if it's declining. It may be better in a smaller market which is growing, and then you can look to expand. You can also look at international trade data for example, from the International Trade Council or from organizations like Zalba. The EU market also has some information that you can get on trade flows, which can give you a good indication of where people are buying your product. But we don't just look at the opportunities and the size of the market. When you're looking at which markets to choose, it's also important to look at what are the barriers to entry. What's going to stop you getting into that market, or what do you need to do to be able to enter that market? So do you need product approvals, for example? Do you need CE to get into the European market? What are the licenses? What are the registrations that you need? If you're providing a service, is there recognition of UK qualifications, for example, in your target country, or do you need to have a local person or a different type of qualification in order to provide your service in that area? What are the customs duties and procedures? Again, that can be a barrier. It can be through free trade agreements. It can also be an advantage for you to compare to someone supplying from another country. What are the rules of origin? So what does that mean? So if you may be supplying your product from the UK, but it is a UK origin product, to comply with free trade agreement rules to get the benefits, then it needs to be a UK product. So take these kind of things into account. Excuse me. Look at the competition again. Competition this time from a barrier to entry. So how strong is that competition? Can you get into the market with that strength? Pricing, of course, is important. Is it very low or very high in that country? What are the opportunities for you? Pricing can be different in each country. So one supplier can supply different pricing in different areas. McDonald's has different pricing in different countries. So take that into account. You may be able to get a better margin or lower margin depending on the area. Currency we've already mentioned, and of course, in the context of our sponsors, that's very important. Having multiple accounts and getting the right exchange rates. Payment terms can be a barrier. One client I was working for was supplying into Portugal, and the payment terms expected there were 150 days from delivery. So can you imagine that's such a long time without any guarantee that they're going to be paid in 150 days. So can you handle that in your cash flow? Are you going to insist on payment up front? What effect is that going to have on your market compared to the local expectations, for example? Language. Is language going to be a barrier? You know, everything will need translating. Labels often need translating into local languages, depending on the rules and regulations. So take all of that into account as well. Transport, logistics, and the country risk. You know, is there a risk in the actual country itself? Cemex, the big cement producer, was doing great business in Venezuela for many years, and then overnight the government there nationalized all of their plants. So again, what is the risk? It's an extreme case, but be aware and understand what risk you may be taking. How good a fit is your product to the market? Again, that's an important point in looking at, you know, if a market is a good potential for you, how well, you know, do you meet the local norms, the local expectations? Are they expecting more features, less features, benefits? If it's a, you know, maybe they want something, you know, if it's a food type product, some countries have more salty taste compared to sugary taste, or vice versa. What are the local markets expectations of your product, and how do you fit with that? And if you need to amend it, how long is that going to take? What's it going to cost? Is it feasible for you to do that? So there are lots of factors to take into account. So we've mentioned lots of different things there, and you know, and it's important to take all of those into account to evaluate and compare one country to another. And you do need to take a scientific approach rather than get a gut feel. So what we do is we list all of the factors affecting the evaluation, so market size, growth rate, all the barriers to entry. And we assign an importance, a weighting factor to each of those elements, to then apply a rating for each country to each of those different factors. So between 1 and 5 we do. And that gives you a score for each factor, the rating times the weighting, which you can then sum up, and you get a total score for the country. So, you know, you're giving a very scientific approach to comparing one country to another, and it creates a kind of league table. So this is an example of the kind of thing that we would use. So all the different types of barriers to entry that we've mentioned, and you know, whether it's difficult for the country that you're looking at, or it's an easy task, and what the weighting is in your decision-making process, and that gives you a score. And then we come up with something like this. This is an actual client that we did an evaluation for looking to export green banana flour, believe it or not, from Zambia into the world. And as you can see, we scored it. Germany, UK, and Spain came equal first. We put Germany at the top, though, because of other factors when we look back at it. So, but it gives this client a list of countries to target. India, and China came in below 13th, 14th, 15th, I think it was. China was the biggest market in the world, but it didn't come as high in the scoring because it's difficult to enter and had lots of challenges. So it's really important, as we've seen, to choose the right market. You can do it without spending a fortune on research, just looking at narrowing down your options in the ways we've discussed. So once we've chosen that market, we then need to look at how do we plan our market entry. And one of the key things is to look at focus. You know, from your priority list, decide where you're going to go. You can't be everywhere. Really don't overstretch yourselves. You've really got to match your ambitions to your resources. It's really better to do one market well than 5 superficially. What I hate and what I always talk to clients about is to avoid what I call touch and go selling. And that's where you go to a market, you start trying to develop the market, enter the market, talking to people, maybe spend a couple of months, maybe even a few months there, and start to develop, you know, your business. But then something happens at home, and your home market takes priority. You've got a bit of a crisis, or you need to you know, or you've got a big order, whatever it might be, and you withdraw from the market you've been trying to enter. And then you think, okay, a few months later, I'll go back now. And you think that you're going to be able to pick up where you left off, and you're not. You're going to be below zero again. So it's really important to avoid that touch and go selling and make sure that you've got the resources to be able to allocate the the time and the effort into the export market exclusivity and not get pulled back. And one key element also is to be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. It can often take a lot longer than we think. You may be lucky. You may get one big order coming in, but to develop a sustainable business, you need to be patient in that market. Clearly, we've all heard of USPs, but we also need to develop our value proposition. So what's the value of our product to the customer? What does it bring to them? What's their perception of the product's value added, basically? We have to do this obviously in our home markets as well, so it's nothing new. But what a reason for showing this is that the value proposition in an international market might be different to the value proposition in your home market. So it's important to understand the market. What's important to your customer in France or in the US? And how does that compare to the UK? How do you develop your message in comparison to your message in your home market? And it will be different. Of course, there are many different route to market options that you can look at. Distributors, agents, they are different. Distributors and agents, one will sell for you, one will you will invoice the clients and pay them a commission. Just be aware of the differences and the difference in risk. Channel partners, recruiting, business to business e-marketplaces are growing very quickly in their usage. Companies like Alibaba and others. Your own website, obviously, but you need to make sure the search engine optimization is right for the international markets and so on. So you look at all the different route to market options, and you decide which one is best by understanding, first of all, who is your customer, how do they buy, and what is their sales cycle. It's very important to ask these questions to really understand what's going to work in a particular market. And each market, again, can be different. So are they selling a product or service and so on? Lots of questions there. Once you get the answers to those, you can interpret them, and it should lead you in a direction of which route to market may be the best in that particular market. In most cases these days, it becomes a hybrid approach with online and either direct or through a distributor or an agent, that kind of thing, but certainly to start with. And through all of that, we can then build up our export strategy. It's important to have an export strategy and a plan, a detailed plan, so that we've got something to benchmark and we know exactly what we're trying to do. So defining your objectives, preparing your export readiness action plan that we've looked at, evaluating and comparing countries, and creating this rank priority list, devising our route to market plan. That's as far as we've gone in this, because we're out of time now, but then on top of that, you need to look at evaluating viability and pricing, deciding the best marketing options, defining how you're going to implement your plan, who's going to do it, who's going to concentrate on it, and then finally creating your export strategy and plan. So compiling a detailed plan with the required financial investment, the required other resources, with milestones, with targets built into their expected outcomes. So you've got something to benchmark at each step of the way, and you can build up and you can compare, and it's there. It doesn't just go in a drawer. It's a living document that you review often, and don't be afraid to change it. Be flexible, but at the same time, don't change too quickly, and be patient. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that's given you a whirlwind tour of starting in export.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much. Very, very informative. And I know there's been a couple of comments in the chat as well, just in terms of the helpfulness of today's session. So just a couple of questions initially. I mean, what early indicators suggest a business is genuinely ready to expand internationally beyond just receiving interest from overseas customers?
Yeah, I think early indicators are that they need to looking at data, looking to see if you are getting inquiries. Obviously, that's a key one. Starting to get orders. If their market is sort of slowing down a little bit at home as well, but they've reached a plateau, then it's the time to start looking at international markets. So there's not one indicator, but I think it's it's a combination of factors. But it's important not to go too early, but equally it's important not to go too late, and to make the best of an opportunity.
Great. Leads quite nicely into the next question, really, which is, just from your experience, what are the top 2 or 3 early red flags potentially that you've seen small businesses ignore when going global, and how do they turn out?
I think one of the most common factors or red flags, if you like, that I see is clients that they've built up a good home market, and they start to get inquiries from overseas because they've got a good brand, got a good online presence, and then someone comes to them and says, "I want to be your distributor in XYZ country," and they think, "Yeah, that's great. They're gonna give me a nice big order." So they sign up an exclusive deal with that distributor, only to find that they're not really the right company for them to be working with, and they make that one order and they never hear from them again. But they're tied up in a contract. So avoid getting tied up too early with a distributor, for example. Make them prove themselves, evaluate your options, but really understand what's going to be the right kind of distributor or partner for you in that market. Define that, get to build a profile, and make sure that it's the right size of company in the right market sector with the right competing, other products that they're selling, the right resources to be able to allocate to your product.
Brilliant. And we've got a question from Leo, just in terms of how can you deal or manage with counterparty risk for B2B businesses, and thinking particularly around payments being made on time?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are different methods that you can use to make sure that you get your payments. I mean, a lot of companies will start by looking for payment in advance, which is fine, but it does restrict your opportunities. So at some point, particularly if it's a regular customer, they're going to want to look at more normalized payment schedule, if you like. You can look at things like cash against documents, so you get paid when before they take possession of the actual shipping document, for example, or a letter of credit, which is a similar kind of thing. So they can only pay. You'll get paid, you're guaranteed to get paid, and they're guaranteed they're going to get the goods. In terms of giving credit in countries, there is credit insurance that you can get. The UK government offers some credit finance facilities as well. So you can look at those kind of things to give you some kind of comfort level in offering credit, but be very wary about that. But ultimately, if you're doing regular business with a client, you're probably going to have to do that unless you're working through a distributor, because then it's the distributor that will be offering the credit terms.
Right. And just final question, what cultural or what's your advice for kind of managing foreign exchange risk when operating in multiple currencies, particularly for small businesses without in-house finance teams?
Yeah, well, that's where I think that companies like Airwallex are fantastic, because the system they have is great, because you can have multiple currencies, multiple currency accounts very quickly, very easily. So you can accept payments in different currencies. You can then exchange it back into pounds if you want to, or you can use it to pay. They have a good system for using that money to pay your suppliers, or to pay staff, or to pay commissions and so on. So you don't actually have to exchange the money. So you can minimize the amount of money that you are exchanging, and you can also see if you do want to transfer it back into pounds, for example, then you can see the best exchange rates, and get the best exchange rates compared to doing it through your bank, for example.
Great. I have actually got one more question from the chat, which is just from Naomi, who's mentioned that she's working on kind of journaling as part of her company activities, and related to life coaching for females. Interesting question. Should she stick with kind of the UK market and looking to sell on Amazon and other platforms, or use more options kind of on a global scale to reach more sales?
I think that depends on what stage you're at with the business in the UK, and if you've saturated the business here or you feel that you have, then start to look overseas. Looking overseas will opens up the opportunities, but does inevitably bring some complications at the same time. So hard to answer that without knowing more, but it really depends on the stage that you're at in the business.
Of course, of course. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much to everyone for joining us on today's webinar. And Mike, thank you so much for all of that insight and expertise, and really is incredibly valuable for our community and audience today. We do hope you found this useful. Do please share your feedback with the link that I'm just about to post in the chat with you all. Again, just helping to kind of share your experience of today's session and allows us to improve future sessions. Do make sure you sign up to the remaining interactive webinars as part of the Finance Beyond Borders series, helping you to gain the support and guidance you need on your business journey. And as well as this, and you will have seen I posted in the chat, you've got the chance to win one of two £1,000 cash grants and a mentoring session with a global expert to help scale your business by signing up to our Scale Stronger email course, helping you to learn how to build stronger financial systems and operate like a global business, even if you're just starting out. So thank you so much to everybody today. As always, we will be sharing the recording and any further resources in a follow-up email this afternoon. And huge thank you again to Mike for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers.